Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Outside, the art and science of watch collection. Today we're going to be taking a look at Christopher Ward watches, and the main thing I want to do in talking about them is navigating through the different kinds of watches they have. Some are based upon an in-house movement called an SH21, and that's in my opinion, it's a really decent, it's a good solid movement. I don't think there's anything especially fancy about it or what you might call high horology, but there's some very, very interesting things about it mechanically in the way it's set up. So that's one thing. The other thing, there are a lot of ETA movements, or even some Sellita, possibly, and then quartz movements too. And the thing of it is that uh, Christopher Ward does something that to me is very important. It tells you what's in the watch. Sometimes you got to go through and sort of read all of the details on it to find out exactly which movement is in the watch. And so it's a matter of navigating through it. One thing, though, that I found, and I found pretty quickly too, is that the price with the less expensive movements in it are significantly less expensive. And to me, that's great. For a long time now, I've had to say, well, I have no problem with ETA or even others inexpensive movements. Some I like better than others, that's true. But the thing that I don't like is when they lie to collectors. When you have a company that says, oh, we do this or we do that, and they don't, or they use these phony baloney names for basically an ETA or a Sellita, you have to dig around and you finally find out that's what it is. Christopher Ward doesn't do that, and I think that's very important for collectors to know that. And they make really interesting watches too. So let's start off. Let's talk about it. The first thing I want to talk about is this caliber SH21. SH stands for Synergies Horlogerie. This is a Swiss company that's owned by Christopher Ward. And so when you have SH, that's for Synergies Horlogerie, and the 21 is for the 21st century. I don't know if they're going to have other versions that will be dot versions, SH21, 1, 2, 3, or 4 or not. I don't know. But basically, one thing you should know is that they're all COSC certified. Okay, so you get a chronometer with that, and they have their automatic movements, but they do have some versions that are wind up, and we'll be taking a look at them. They've got a double barrel, which I really like a lot, because that will extend the reserve on it about 120 hours, about a 5-day reserve. And they have the basic functions, their central hour, minute, and second hands, and they're designed so you can add more modules to it. And so that, I think, is a very good idea. There are probably more companies, more watch companies than you may realize, that have the same model. It's sort of like, we're going to have a basic movement, we're going to use that with a lot of different watches. The one we looked at not too long ago, Val Fleurier, has a movement, a basic movement that's used by a lot of different companies, not only different watches within the same company. So Christopher Ward, this is their own baby, and the good thing about it is, if they want to make a change, they know that movement. So anyway, so that's one thing. But remember, probably the majority of the movements in Christopher Ward are not the SH21. That's okay, though, because Christopher Ward, when you take a look at their website, for example, they'll tell you this is what it is. Okay, so let's start our navigational tour of Christopher Ward. They have 4 categories. It looks like they have five, but they're four. Um, the first one is the dress category. Then they have what they call dive and sport, then aviation, and then motorsport. And then they have sort of another one that's really part of motorsport called Morgan, which is just, to me, delightful because for years, I mean, like a lot of years, I've been a big fan of Morgan motor cars. In fact, came very close to getting a Morgan three-wheeler not long ago. I will see, maybe I still will. Okay, so this first one, now this one is called the C1 Grand Malvern, the Power Reserve. This has got the SH21 in it, and it's $1,935. Now, I told you that the watches with their best movement in are a little more expensive, but still, that's a very good price. That's a tungsten rotor that they have on the back. You can take a look at that. They have an exhibition window on the back. I think it's a really neat one. This particular one has the power reserve indicator. You got 120 hours, so it's something you might forget, and you can take a look at that. When it gets near the red zone, your wine's almost out. Here's some more dress watches. Now, they're from the dress watch category, but that doesn't mean that because they're from that category, they all have the same movement. They don't. For example, the one that's called the C3 Grand Tour Chronograph Quartz. It's a quartz watch. There's like a lot of things you can do with quartz. You have a lot of gizmos on there for a chronograph, and it's only $455, which, is pretty good. Now, you have another one at the bottom called, again, C1 Grand Malvern 5-day automatic 1705. I think that's sort of like the basic entry level for the SH21 from the Grand Malvern. Another one, now this is an interesting one. This is where you can get goofed up. Because I thought, well, if it says C1, then those are all the SH21s, but that's not the case. The C1 Grand Malvern Moon Phase is $1,595, and it has in it what's called a caliber JJ04, and that's for Johannes Janke. Now, he's the guy who was the architect behind the SH21. But this is based on the moon phase, the movement for the moon phase is based on an ETA 2836-2. So that's the base of it. So, like I said, there may be some other way they could have done it that make it a little more obvious, a little easier. But so if you're thinking of getting one and you want the in-house movement, just look very carefully. On the other hand, you may not. That may not be a big thing. The ETA 2836-2, $1,500, actually closer to $1,600. That's not so bad. That's not a crazy overpriced price for one of these watches. Okay, the next category is the dive sport. Now, the two that actually this is one that I picked out to start off looking at these with is called the Bronze GMT. And this has the ETA 2893-2 in it. And they come in different ways. One, the bronze, you got the bronze, what they call raw. And then the other one is patinated, or patinated, I'm not sure how they pronounce it. And it's got a GMT in it. And you can get them with leather or rubber. They have another one that's called webbing. It's sort of like a canvas material for the band. By the way, for those of you who are interested in wristwatch check, I have on my H. Moser at C. Henry double hairspring, one of my favorite watches. Okay, so these are a couple other ones. Now, when you look at the price, the $1,135. That's, you're talking about an ETA movement, but it's an ETA movement. They're not asking $5,000-$10,000 for it either. And they're both out of bronze. Okay, this next one is some more of the dive sport they have. Um, they have one that's called the C60 Trident COSC 600. That's the whole name of it. So they include, when you see the word COSC, it doesn't always mean that they have their SH-21 movement, but often it does. So they have, because some of the ones have ETAs that are certified as COSC. Okay, now this one is 1,960, and it's got a metal bracelet. I think that's a pretty good buy, and it's sort of a date, and it's just sort of a nice, regular looking watch. Now next to it is the C60. Again, this is the C60. You think you're getting the same movement, but you don't. This C60 has a Sellita 210 in it. Now it's about half that price at 910. And that's a big yellow, bright, dive-looking kind of watch. I think everything with a big yellow or orange reminds me of a Doxa diver, but that's me. And but this is a nice-looking watch. Okay, the price is nice too. All right, the third one I have here is called the C65 Trident GMT. Okay, and it's running on a 28.93, and it's 10.25 for the price. So what you can see is that the watch with, and at least with these three, the watch with the in-house movement, it's a good movement, is about twice as much as the ones without it. Okay, but again, you know that. So you see something inexpensive, say, oh boy, I'm gonna grab one of those because they're a good deal. But then you realize, you get home and you haven't looked very carefully, it's not the movement you wanted. So that's one of the things about Christopher Ward. Pay attention to that. All right. Now this next group is the aviation group. Now, having once been a pilot, I love the aviation watches, and these I really like. Very interesting one. Now this gets sort of pricey. This one's $34.20, but now when you think of some of the watches we have, $34.20 is nothing. Okay, I mean, you look at some of these high horology watches, you can't find any that cheap. But this is near getting to the top thing. Well, let's take a look at this one. It's called the C8 Aldir TMB limited edition. That's one thing that bothers me a little about a lot of these watches. They all have limited editions, this and limited editions that. I don't know. I wish they made a whole bunch of them, but I think you can justify a little higher price. Now, this one may actually be because of a limited amount of aluminum that they can get from a World War II pilot's Mk1 Spitfire aluminum engine. Now, the engine, I think the airplane, this came from an airplane that crashed. It was a mid-air collision. And I don't know if Aldir was in it or not, but the thing of it was that he was part of the Battle of Britain, and there's a lot of history to that. And I like the looks of the watch, and I'm not a fan of black dials simply because for me they're harder to see the time. But this one works really well. And then on the back, instead of what you can see, there's something that he used to tell his wingmen, stick to me like glue, which makes a lot of sense when somebody's throwing Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs at you, try to shoot you down. Okay, so this is an interesting watch. I like it, and it's got a good movement in it. And oh yeah, big thing about this one, it's a hand wound movement. I like hand wound movements much better. They're thinner because you don't have the rotor to contend with, and so anyway, this is one I like. That's my own prejudice. Here's a couple more from aviation. Okay, this next watch is called the Power Reserve, or C8 Power Reserve chronometer. It's 1875. And one thing I really like about this watch is that you flip it over, and on the back, you can see the movement. You can see the SH-21 movement. Now, it's been modified like the last one we looked at, So it's hand wound. It's got a nice big crown up there for winding it, and it's got the power reserve indicator, small seconds. Then it's got the date at 3 o'clock. This to me is a very, very cool watch. You can flip it over and see the back. The rotor's not in your way, so you can see more of the entire movement. It's another watch I like a lot. Now, this last group of watches, or this is a category that they use, is called a motorsport. And the motorsport has a subgroup, and we'll take a look at that in a second. But this one you have, this one is called the C7 Rosso Corsa COSC. Okay, now this is an example of where you have a COSC 28 ETA 2836. This is so it's been adjusted to the point where it will pass the COSC certification. Okay, most of the ETAs that you get, they simply have to go through a process for adjustment of the regulator and any kind of balance wheel regulation that has to be done to meet COSC certified standards. This one does, but it doesn't have the SH21 in it, which are all COSC certified. Anyway, this is an attractive watch, something you might want to consider. 1135, not bad at all. Okay, this last one that we're going to take a look at is called the Morgan. The Morgan is sort of like a subcategory of the motorsport, and the reason I like Morgans is that it's my favorite by far British sports car or motor car. And this one's called the C1 Morgan Aero 8 chronometer, and it's 2570. Now this one does use the SH21, but it's been modified for hand winding. Now here you have a lot of stuff, at least for someone like me, that put everything together. It's hand wound, you have in-house movement, you have a great exhibition window in the back. You can see the whole thing, how it works, and a lot of no rotor to get in the way of looking at the movement. And then you can see the double barrels there. So you can get, this is a good 5-day, 120-hour movement that you're going to have in this. It's a wonderful watch. And it's got the little Morgan wings up at the top, right below the 12 o'clock, right below where it says 60. And it's got a power reserve indicator, small seconds. It doesn't have a date, but that's okay. Anyway, so this is another watch they have. So all in all, and looking at Christopher Ward watches, you have a sort of some neat things. It's a British company, but then they have their movements are made in Switzerland, so they can have a Swiss movement in it. And I would be just as happy if they made them in Great Britain, but that's neither here nor there. This is I think they have some very nice watches. They do a lot of their sales online. I don't think they have a single boutique. If they do, it's news to me. But whatever you want, you can just order them online. And I'm sure there's some places that, some brick and mortar places you can walk in and you may be able to find them. But for the most part, here you have a very inexpensive watch relative to what watch collectors are expected to pay sometimes. And you know what you're getting. Can't ask for more, at least as far as I'm concerned. You can, the watches I like tend to be more expensive and a little different than these, but it's okay. I mean, it's got several watches here. Wouldn't mind having it all, including this Morgan or the Aviation one, that Al Deere one with the in the back with the aluminum from the engine block. That's a trip. Okay, well, listen, I'd be interested in hearing what your opinions are. This is a very interesting watch company. A lot of people were asking me, well, how come you don't have anything about Christopher Ward? Well, now I do. And I'd like to get your feedback, see what you think. And as always, this is an invitation to subscribe if you'd like. And until Sunday, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Outside, the Art and Science of Watch Collection.